So welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Health Made Simple show. I am here with our host, Dr. Bart Precourt, who has been a healthcare practitioner for over 20 years, practicing a range of modalities, including chiropractic, kinesiology, acupuncture, functional nutrition and supplementation, and lab testing, all out of his clinic, Balance Health Studio in Seagrove Beach, Florida, as well as virtually with people all over the world. He's also the founder of the Health Edge program, which is a cutting-edge health program for entrepreneurs and executives wanting to take their health to the next level. So he's worked with celebrities and athletes all around the world. And tonight we're going to dive into hair loss, as we were saying. But first, we've got a clinical insight. I enjoy your clinical insight. So it's always good to hear what you're dealing with, on the ground every day. You got people coming into the clinic, and you're able to really see what people are dealing with.
Yeah, so I'm going to share with you kind of two very interesting liver cases, and they really mimic each other until, well, two different people. One's a male, one's a female. They're both one's the guy is just shy of 50. The girl was in her early 40s. Similar in the fact that they're both presenting with some fatty liver, some higher liver enzymes, and they both had hepatitis. They both had hepatitis, I believe it was B. Yeah, B, and sometimes it presents as D. So one of the more mild type of hepatitis. So anyways, and this is interesting, Karen, where it's so much of his perspective and how we approach our everyday health. So the good news is in both situations, we were able to overcome it all, which is fascinating. And just listen, for everyone out there that's dealing with, like, they heard that they have a bad liver, or they got fatty liver disease, or their enzymes are through the roof, whatever it may be. These were both these scenarios. One of them in particular was super bad, like hanging out in the hospital type stuff, conversations about liver replacement. Wow. And in that situation, we did 100% a, kind of a functional nutrition, functional medicine type approach. And the other one the enzymes weren't that bad, yet the scare was still there because of the hepatitis and because of different immune markers and antibody markers. Anyway, so the one individual, they both took a fair amount of action in the beginning. One a little hesitant, and one had already been practicing health. When I say practicing health, I think there's two ways. There's probably more than two ways, but I think there's kind of two approaches. I'm going to do something when I get sick. And so I don't want to be sick. And then when I get sick, I will take action. And then there's a kind of another school or another camp that is, man, I'm going to do whatever it takes to be healthy.
Yeah.
But they are not the same thing.
No,
they definitely, and I know, like, if anyone's listening tonight and they think, well, of course I don't want to be sick, and of course I want to be healthy, but your actions determine both. So in the one situation, the female, she just didn't want to be sick. And so when she had all this diagnosis and find out what was going on, and this was a really bad case of jaundice, there was some serious liver stuff going on here. There was a little of an arm twisting. Each step along the way. You got to take these herbs, got to get some milk thistle. We got to, flush out. We've got to give time out to intermittent fasting. There was a lot to do here. And it was a little bit of arm twisting and a little bit of like dragging along the way. And yet the driving was liver replacement, which is not that's not a really good option to have. So the fear was enough there for her to take the action. And ultimately, it cleared up. It took a couple months, 4, 5, 6 months, which is not a long time. It is not a long time to go from the conversation of potentially having your liver replaced to ending up with normal lab values. Normal lab values. And the truth is, a lot of people, the men and women that are doing the type of work that I'm doing here, or we're doing is we see that often. Because the body, especially the liver, is so restorative. And that's what's so fascinating. That's what gives me, as a practitioner over the years, especially practicing Chinese medicine as well, recognizing how powerful the liver can be and how much influence we can have on it by giving it the right things. I don't even like telling this, but you can kill off like 2/3 of the liver and it'll heal if you do the right things. Right. All right. So so the other situation, the gentleman, he found out that he had this hepatitis, and it blew his mind, and it really bothered him. And like many, like when you get a diagnosis, it rocks you a little bit. So he was all in. And now it's taken his health commitments, which were pretty much on par. They were good, to a whole nother level.
Yeah, wow.
So what's interesting here, Karen, as a practitioner, my job is equally the same for both of them. Yeah. I help them figure out what's going on. I've helped them figure out what system, organ, or gland is at dysfunction, which one of those we're trying to elevate to try to level up, become better, healthier, stronger human beings, and then the mechanisms to go by. My job is to create the strategy, but I don't do the work.
No, hey, you can't implement it for people, unfortunately, but you can't.
Sure. And then it always makes me like sit back and scratch my head and wonder, is there more that I could do? How could I have more influence? The one, when they got done fixing it, got done taking care of themselves.
Yes. Okay.
And they went back to the old patterns and habits.
And that's what potentially created the problem in the first place, right? Unfortunately, you go back to the old habits, you can, maybe you don't have that problem again, but you create other problems.
Yeah, and potentially they come back. Now, in this particular scenario, some of the symptoms have been coming back.
Okay.
And I think this is the part I want to share with everyone in case you've been in this scenario or someone else has been in. So the second time around is often when people then just quit. Okay. Because they thought they fixed it. And my message here tonight is, listen, we don't fix our health. It's a process. It's an ongoing program that we live of just kind of working on our health and continuously trying to level up. There's no done with this. I'm not fixed. We don't get to that point. So unfortunately,
I don't have to eat organic anymore. I'm done.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, in this scenario, the second time around, because it was hard work, it was a shift in lifestyle, it was a shift in a paradigm shift in how to think about the human body instead of, think of trying to fix what's wrong, trying to make it healthier. And even that philosophy was adopted for at least a short period of time. But now that some of the symptoms are really the lab values have started to change, literally the conversation was, well, it didn't work.
Yeah.
And that's the part as a practitioner that leaves my head scratching. And both of these were virtual clients. So I can't reach out and shake them or headbutt them. So that doesn't work.
Which headbutting is frowned upon usually anyway.
Yeah, no doubt frowned upon, often very, very effective at the same time. Yeah. So I think my share with our peeps tonight is that, there's a journey that we're always on when it comes to our health. And sometimes you overcome something and then you have to revisit it again. And that's okay. Hopefully, whatever, misfortune happens, you use it as fuel. And that's where these were totally different, where the gentleman has used this to burn a fire. Now everything has changed, and things I didn't even expect. Like he's totally given up alcohol. He's totally deep dive into all kinds of just like biohacks. He does hot, he does cold. So it's fascinating to watch that. But human behavior says for everything there's an opposite, and then in the opposite took place in the other. So that's my little clinical insight today. That one, the liver is an amazing. Part of the human body, has incredible restorative powers. If you beat your liver up and all you did was clean your liver, it'd be the similar kind of conversation that I have when I talk about healing your gut. If your liver is beat down and you heal it up, you'll be a different human being. That is where your liver supplies the majority of all the other meridians with their chi, which is your life force. So the majority of our life force is coming from our liver. So if you improve the health of your liver, you're improving a big part of your life. So that's one part of it. And then the other part is, given that thought process, is our goal just not to be sick?
Yeah.
Or is it to be healthy? And respectfully, I would say a lot of people start off with just the goal of not trying to be sick. And I get that. And what's cool is sometimes they then start to experience health and kind of get like addicted to that. Like, wow, like this healthy thing, this is really cool. I love feeling this way. I love having, a clear mind, strong body. And then hopefully if you have to revisit the lesson, that you don't bail out.
Yeah.
Because, and again, a conversation I had more than one time today, very interesting, was that our health, like we'll revisit things if we didn't learn them.
Well, isn't that true with every aspect of your life?
It really is. Yeah.
Not just your health. Things will, Oprah says, if you don't listen to the whisper, it will give you a harder knock.
A harder knock. Yeah, I believe that. Yeah. So anyways, so those are my insights tonight. And, I always love sharing those. And it's, especially I'm in the, I'm in the trenches regularly, and I'm always amazed on the capacity and the potential that the human body has to heal. As much as I've been doing this for 25 years, and every single week, I always have one of those moments. Wow. Like, the human body is just absolutely amazing. The power that made the body heals the body. And if we fill in the blanks by we giving it the tools, and tonight I'm going to talk about fill in the blanks when it comes to regrowing our hair, especially if we've had an episode where all of a sudden it starts falling out. But if we can get out of the way, but then also back in the way of helping ourselves heal, there's a lot that can happen.
Yeah, no, I love it. So awesome. Okay, so when we're talking about hair loss, what type? I mean, you just kind of said maybe it's not your type of hair loss. What are we talking about?
So, like male pattern baldness, that there's a lot of reasons. Some of it's genetic. So I want to just decipher what we're going to do tonight. So in a moment, we're going to talk about the hair loss that comes on suddenly.
Yeah.
Okay. And so a lot of times, like male pattern baldness, it's caused by testosterone converting into something called DHT. And that's really not what I'll be talking about tonight. And that would be a worthy conversation, because you can do some preventative things in that situation. It often, sometimes genetics, when it comes to especially guys, you're predetermined what's going to take place there. When it comes to the pattern of your hair.
It's also not really affecting your health the same way, is it? Like, it's not.
Correct.
Baldness. Like, is it what we're going to talk about, some health kind of underlying and some things that hair loss can mean. Let's say if I just started losing my hair.
Yes.
It doesn't mean the same, like it's not a health indicator necessarily for you.
Well said. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. So oddly enough, you can almost say that men balding heads, often is an indicative of high testosterone. So it would almost be a good thing. But what we're going to talk about tonight, in fact, the hair is a little bit of a window of a bigger picture of what's going on with health. So it is definitely an eye opener of what else is going on with the human body. It is just usually a delayed one. There's one situation where we will talk about tonight. There is something that can trigger immediate hair loss. And I think you're going to have something to share there with what you just told me a moment ago. But let's, before we even talk about what causes hair loss, let's talk about how we grow hair.
Okay.
And because understanding this will help us understand how we interfere with it. So there's really three phases. There's called an anagen phase, a catagen phase, and a telogen phase. And let me walk through those. Those are like things you learned way back in school, and I had to revisit during, all this, really these last couple of years of like, all right, what did we learn back then? So during the anagen phase, that'll last anywhere from 3 to 5 years, or sometimes even longer. That's how long a single strand of hair will grow.
Wow.
Like for years. And there are situations, and make sure you remind me of, for some people that they can't grow long hair. And I'll talk about that in just a moment here. So that anagen phase, that's when everything's intact. We're feeding it. Your hormones are working. You're going through life and everything's pretty good. We're feeding it. So, and the hair needs very specific type of nutrients, and we'll talk about those as well. And then there's the catagen phase, and that phase is where it goes into transition. So the transition, technically, if we were like looking at the follicles, they kind of shrink back down a little bit. And it's just a temporary phase. It's like a transition phase where they go from the anagen to the telogen phase. And the telogen phase is basically a resting phase that'll stay in for a period of time and then fall out, where it's no longer in growth.
Yeah.
So it's that anagen phase that's really important of, making sure we have all the proper nutrients. So those are the three general phases. So what has taken place, if anyone right here tonight So let's go into some of the causes. There are 3 primary causes. These we're going to do a deep dive. We're going to bounce around. We'll bounce around on these.
Like, yeah, really losing your hair potentially.
Yeah.
All of a sudden. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a name for it. There's a diagnosis for it. It's called Telogen Effluvium, and which they call TE, just the letter TE, Telogen Effluvium. And really what that means is that there's been a sudden onset of increase of hair loss. So on any given day, you're normal, like you're just normal. You're in a shower and you lose some hair. You lose a
lot of hair.
Yeah.
Well,
you might lose on any given day 100 to 150 follicles. No big deal.
Seems like it. I mean, I always have a lot of hair. I've never suffered with a hair loss situation, but man, do I lose a lot of hair.
Well, partially because yours is very long, so it looks like it. Yeah.
That's true.
But on average, healthy loss would be about 100 to 150 a day.
Okay.
Now, what will happen when you have telogen effluvium, where you have this hair loss, it's excessive hair loss, in a very short period of time, you may lose 50% of the hair on your head.
Yeah, yeah.
Some people lose it in patches as well.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go into the root causes, the 3 primary root causes. That's where I want to dive a little deeper, because that'll help determine the strategy for each individual who's losing hair, which one they need to kind of pay attention to. So the first one is, I'm going to say stressors, but one of the biggest one is fever.
Fever,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So fever is a stressor, no doubt. It's a massive stress to the body. So remember, when you have a fever, that's an innate immune response. The body has said, we are in trouble right here, right now. We have been invaded. We have to create a fire and kill the sucker off. That's essentially what a fever is. Knowing that there's going to be some self-harm. We're going to beat ourselves up. And fevers, Karen, just a little side note. You picture your body's in a full out war when you're having a fever. It takes a lot of energy to sustain a fever. So fevers create massive nutritional deficiencies.
Okay.
So we're going to go with number 1 is a fever, but side by side with that, I want to say it's fever, stress, and bacteria.
Okay.
And because of the last 2 years, we saw a lot of fevers. We're going to just kind of focus on that particular one. Number 2 is nutrition.
We saw a lot of stress as well. I mean, we saw a lot of
no doubt about it. And for the same reason, the stress requires a tremendous amount of resources, and we forget about that. And we'll get into this a little bit tonight too, because typically when we're stressed, we're not thinking, I got to refuel my body with these great nutrients to keep up a good fight. You start eating the wrong foods.
Yeah.
We become nutrient deficient.
Alcohol, maybe not making good choices.
Yeah. So the second cause of hair loss is nutrient deficiencies. Specifically, that's where you start to see the anemias. So you can have an iron deficiency, you can have a ferritin deficiency, you can have a vitamin C deficiency. And this is an important one, especially because what you just talked about, these last 2 years, we saw a lot of stress. Well, the number 1 vitamin that's being depleted during stress is vitamin C. That comes from your adrenal glands. And one of the most important, never talked about, maybe it's talked about, very infrequently talked about, is the need for hair to have vitamin C, because vitamin C binds collagen.
Yeah.
And if we don't have vitamin C, you won't bind the collagen for the hair follicle to grow. So vitamin C deficiencies by themselves is a way that you could have a nutritional deficiency and lose hair. So number 1, fever. Number 2, nutritional deficiencies. And number 3, that nutritional deficiencies, I'm kind of grouping in there all the iron anemias.
Okay.
And we'll talk about some labs tonight as well. And then number 3 is going to be thyroid dysfunction.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Interesting thing here is that, Karen, you can have a thyroid function that's either gone high or low.
Okay.
So we want to see the labs for that. But those 3 things are the 3 things we want to kind of observe and analyze as we move forward. Say, all right, if you were to fall into one of those categories, which one would it be? And maybe it's a little bit of each one. So let's talk about how it actually takes place here. So there's one situation where, due to, say, a virus or a high stress, you kick your body prematurely from this anagen phase, this growth phase, all the way to your telogen phase.
Okay.
So
yeah, we've got a comment in the chat here. I've been losing hair since having had COVID in January.
Okay. So what happens in that phase? You get the virus and it kicks your body from this growth phase, which is supposed to be 3, 5, 7 years, and it kicks those follicles all the way into the telogen phase prematurely. And they could be in this resting phase where they're literally just hanging out. And then they start to shed off little bit by little bit. And like for some of the women, you'll notice like you stop wanting to wash your hair, you stop wanting to brush your hair, because when you do that, you're shedding more and more and more rapidly. So that's one situation that takes place. There's an expectation after birth for my mommies out there with pregnant, they got a baby. Part of postpartum is a hair loss. And as a result, and again, this falls into the category of nutritional deficiencies and most likely stress.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And that's why you'll hear me say, we've said it here on the show, post pregnancy, adrenal support, number one, first thing you go for, because everything in the mommy's body has changed. And then there's the situation where you have the inability to grow long hair. Hair breaks, it gets certain length. This isn't as frequent, but the ones out there understand exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, we've actually got a comment in the chat here. I've never been able to grow long hair and find that I'm always losing hair. Okay.
That's the chronic stress individual. That's typically what's happening, in that anagen phase just shortens down. So they, instead of maybe 3, 5, 7 years, they might be 1 year, might be 9 months, 12 months, a year and a half, 2 years. Hair never gets long, gets to a certain phase. It becomes deficient again, and most likely in some type of a nutritional deficiency. So at the end, I'll make sure that I kind of say, these are the core supplements you want to take. And these are the labs you might want to run. And these would be some herbs you might want to support as well. And then I'll give some just good old fashioned habits here. So that individual who just can't grow long hair, same thing. You're kicking your body out of this anagen growth phase into this, telogen phase. And then that's this where the body's just ready to shed it off again. Real quick note. So I don't want to forget this for that individual. And adaptogen herbs are your best friend. If you're not already on something, we use something called, probably the number one adaptogen herb for this situation is ashwagandha. Okay. You're under chronic stress, like ashwagandha, looking back on it, I should have had everyone taking ashwagandha during the pandemic, because it was just chronic, stress state. And I was definitely thinking, we were thinking a lot of immune stuff, but the chronic stress was probably the biggest, deficiency causing issue. So ashwagandha, we use one called ashwagandha forte. I have a couple different ones, but that one would be very therapeutic. And I would probably have you take 3 tablets a day, daily. And then also fill in the blanks that we'll talk about tonight. So those are the primary. Oh, and there's one more, Karen. There's another situation where people lose hair, and it happens very fast. And typically that'll happen when it's been drug induced. So, and
we've taken a prescription medication, let's say, or something that's caused something in our body to affect our hair.
Yeah, essentially has a same but different effect that a fever would, or something that shocks the body. And I saw some of this, and I'm not blaming it, but I definitely saw some of this with people who took some vaccines, or different medications. So, there's a little risk. There's a risk in anything. So it's not like it's bad on those, but yes, we did see that. So where you see this massive, quick, and I didn't have a fever, I didn't, go through long stressful periods, but then you went on certain medications. Yeah. And there are certain medications.
With the vaccine I was telling you about, a friend of mine. Yeah. Earlier, straight the day she took the vaccine, her hair started falling out.
Yeah. So it shocks the body. So what happens in that situation, all of them that are in that resting phase, or kind of that hanging out phase, the telogen phase, boom, it sheds them. Okay. Yeah. And literally they die off, and it could be a significant amount. You might, in that moment, you could lose 5, 10, 15, 20% of the hair follicles that are hanging out in that phase. So, if that's your head of hair, you're now nervous. Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely.
So those are typically, the three, we'll say the how the mechanisms work. Now understand, again, let's go back to fever for a moment. And this is an area that I think it's collectively, we don't do really good about bringing our body through convalescence. We're about rehabbing our body once we've been not well, once we've been sick. And typically what I'll see is this. Someone has COVID and they'll be like, yeah, in 3 days I was back in the gym. I get it. And I get the bravado of it. I probably do some of it. Well, I think I used to do a lot more of it. I used to. Now I'm all right with climbing that hill slowly again, because when we go through something like that, remember, it takes a tremendous amount of energy, which means resources. Resources are trace minerals, vitamins, and amino acids. And when you burn all of those out and you're depleted, but you go back to the same old you, the same work, the same email, the same social media, the same environment, but you're depleted. Now, this is when you're kicking your body, you're kicking your own rear end. And that's where Karen saw the pause between the COVID fever and infection, 2 to 3 months to the hair loss.
Yeah.
And that's a real important thing for all of us to understand. If you haven't rehabbed, you still have to rehab. You still have to catch back up on all the things that you probably have become deficient in. So there's, I already mentioned vitamin C. Vitamin C is super imperative for hair, simply because we need to be able to bind collagen, and collagen is a big part of it. And again, I'll talk about different types of collagen in just a moment here. So another part of this is thinking about our adrenals. Our adrenals are part of let's say the stress management system. And when we push those, and it's okay to push them, they're there for, to help us manage stress. The challenge is if they've been pushed too long. So for example, if someone tells me, well, we just had someone, make a note that they can't grow long hair.
Yeah. Is there anybody who can't grow long hair? Like, is it always a stressor? Is there any, like, some people are genetically have longer hair than other people?
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of that'll happen because of the phase, how long they stay in the anagen phase. Yeah. So that's part of it. So some people are staying 3 years in the growth phase, but some people are staying 7 years. And one person, so listen, we've all gone through situations where we've done really good, given like really good nutrients to our body, lots of vitamin E, which is really good for hair, skin, and nails. And all of a sudden your hair starts growing faster, and you notice like your nails are stronger, et cetera. So there are things we can do to slow it down, but also speed it up.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to dive a little bit deeper in here tonight. So there's some other huge deficiencies when we talk about, let's talk about anemia for a moment here. So this is a big one. So I saw most of the hair loss, not exclusively to women, but mostly.
And anemia, how common is that in women? I don't know anybody who, I don't know any woman, including myself, who has never been on an iron supplement.
Well, good observation. And if they haven't been, most women are, as long as you've been a cycling woman, most likely you're borderline anemic. Now, again, so let's reverse this and say you were under a heavy stressor, you had a fever, and in that fever you used up all your resources. And oftentimes during that fever, you're not eating a lot. But the number one thing that you need for anemia to reproduce red blood cells, which are getting a whooping during the fever phase, right? You're killing off cells left and right. So you need to rebuild them, but you need the best resources for that are things like animal meat. Specifically, red meat is the number one thing to build red blood cells and to gain iron back into the body. Second to that, dark meat chicken, dark meat turkey. And yes, we can get it from our vegetables, but it's not nearly as available or readily usable as if we do from our animal meats. And the challenge is we, especially nowadays, we see more and more of a tendency, especially women, Karen, that don't eat red meat.
Yeah.
This is a real issue. And unfortunately, I think we're about to enter an era with social media and some other people getting into health that shouldn't have anything to do with it. They're going to start talking about how we got to stop eating red meat in the world. And that's a big no-no. Like, I don't know the ultimate fix to for climate change and all that stuff, but I'll tell you this, you start preventing young children and how about this, just human beings from eating red meat, from healthy red meat, we're going to have an issue. We're going to have a lot more fragile people. We're going to have a lot more sick people. Ultimately, your hair is a protein. And if it breaks easy, you need more protein in your life. Specifically, you need amino acids, and you need all the essential amino acids. Can you get them from plants? You probably could. The challenge here, Karen, is when we have that conversations, and I think one of our conversations soon will be like a vegan versus like a carnivore diet, just to kind of lay out the pros and cons. The challenge with that is that you're never going to get enough.
Yeah.
So for example, pea protein is probably the most complete protein out there for vegetables. Great source. You get all the essential amino acids, but the amount you would need to be equivalent to like 4 ounces of red meat would be an amount that no one would ever eat.
Yeah.
And that's where the problem lies. So when with fever, and then we talk about the loss of nutrients and all the stuff that goes with it, iron and zinc and vitamin C and all of the fact that we're borderline anemic, and then having this issue is pushing a lot of people into this anemia. And then we see ferritin levels. So when you run a complete iron panel, which the bummer is when I see most iron panels out there, they don't run ferritin, or they'll just run one part of it. So we want to see ferritin levels no less than 30 and probably closer to 50 or higher. And that's going to let us know how well the body is functionally holding on to iron. And that's a real important one versus just total iron. The challenge I have sometimes with iron pills that you mentioned, you can take a bunch of iron pills and they can be cascading and floating around in the blood system. But if they're not being bound by the tissue, not being absorbed by the red blood cells, that's not really telling us much. And that's where having what they call TIBC, total iron binding capacity, and understanding ferritin levels. And that's, again, I know I'm talking a little technical with labs here, but that's I guess I'm just mentioning that how you run a lab is really, really important. If you're going to take the time, energy, and money to do that, make sure you're running with someone that understands all the markers that are needed to properly assess, whether or not you have a little bit of anemia, because there's B vitamin anemias as well. And there's other markers that indicate that. There's, of course, you can run B12, which is important. You can run a folate, which is really important. But then we also want to see things like the homocysteine levels, which is when those are high, it's typically as a result of your body not having enough B vitamins, and you're creating inflammation as a result of it. So there's a lot when it comes to running those labs and anemia, or really understanding more so than just taking big iron pills.
Yeah. Okay. We've got a question here. How much red meat a week do you recommend?
My favorite way to answer this is to be intuitive about it. So I want to back that up, because that's a really, really important thing. So to be intuitive about it, meaning there's everyone understands what I'm about to say next. There's a time that you're like, man, I'm just craving a big fat red burger or steak or something like that. And especially women. And you'll do this a couple of times through the course of the month. And that's literally when your body's begging you for some more iron. So listen to it. I would go as far as saying this. It definitely should be at least weekly, minimum. I find, especially for most women, you're protein deficient, period. Protein deficient. And unfortunately, without those amino acids, it's very difficult to make strong human bodies. And if we want to be strong human beings, we got to put the building blocks in there properly. And amino acids are what build up protein, build up muscle fibers. So I'm going to encourage, and I'm still, same thing. I still think that it should be clean. I still think that we should be in, grass-fed, organic. Same thing with our chicken eggs, pasture raised.
It's better to have less high quality than more low quality, right?
Yes, but the only part I would say, Karen, that makes me have to rethink that sometimes when I say that to people, the challenge with that is that less meat often means more white stuff. Okay. I wish it wasn't that way. I wish less meat meant more vegetables, but I don't find that to be true.
But okay, so if that was true, that would be the best.
Yes, if we were just talking about God's garden, yes. Instead of picking a poor meat, go back to God's garden. Yet what I typically find is that not meat means pizza.
Yeah. Okay. Or pasta or
pasta. Yeah. Or bread. Yeah. So we want to be as much as we cognizant to that. And if you haven't been eating meat for a while, so right now I'm kind of retraining my wife to so which has been really fun for both of us. It's interesting. So if you had asked her, maybe a year ago, she would have told you that red meat upsets her stomach.
Yeah.
And we had a conversation, or maybe she heard us talking about it here. And I said, listen, if red meat bothers you, most likely it is because you can't handle red meat. It's a you thing.
Acid isn't strong enough?
Yes, precisely.
Okay.
Your digestive system is not strong enough to break down that red meat, because red meat has, collagen in it. It's more difficult to break down. Yeah. But you get more value from it. So we've had this conversation, and she has really been working on taking her digestive enzymes, and we get super high quality, which then has made it fun for me to cook more. So I become like the burger master and the chicken wing master. And that's really about it. I'm like, that's where I tap out. Those two things, I'm really,
you got dialed in.
I'm dialing them in every week. It's getting better and better. And she's been such a trooper by, eating burgers. So now we can, go where we'd now split a pound. Like we'll get a pound of raw beef or, burger, right? Burger meat, some grass-fed burgers, and I'll cook them up and we split it. So, pre-cooked, that's a half pound each. And, guts feel fine, energy feel fine. What's the beauty about once you do start to involve a little bit red meat, you don't eat nearly as much because it's so satiating, because you can get the good fat and protein. And again, this is almost a conversation we should have between like vegetables and like a vegan.
Because I think people do, it's important, but people eat too much. Like you probably don't need it 3 times a day. Like if you're having like bacon and sausage for breakfast and then something whatever for lunch and then a steak for dinner, that's probably like, you probably don't need to eat red meat or.
Yeah, I think we've probably overdone it. And mostly I think we've overdone it with crap.
Yeah.
And again, when I say we have burgers, we don't do burger buns. We're not going to put a starch with a fat and protein, and that's where things really go wrong.
Yeah.
So you want your fat and proteins to be fat and proteins, but not with the starch. When we start putting bread and French fries and stuff like that, granted, I know they're yummy, yet they're not going to serve us. That's where the whole digestive system, blood sugar levels, that's where it all gets funky. And then you won't get satiated as well.
Yeah. Okay. So what about, so that's anemia. We've got another person here who started losing hair about 10 years ago or more. I think it was related to menopause. Okay. I started using a professional shampoo system, which has helped, but not able to obtain it during COVID.
Okay. So let's talk about it. So most likely 10 years ago, there was a stressor of sorts. Remember, it doesn't always have to be.
Count as a stressor? Like, do people lose hair during menopause?
Yeah, yes, because there's such a massive imbalance, Karen. So things have changed, and rarely are people. So, we're not taught a lot about this stuff. We're not talking about the changes that the human, especially the female body goes through perimenopause, and how deficient they're going to become in like things like anemia, like iron, like. When your cycle is going to go crazy during that time, and you'll see a lot of extra blood loss and then holding and all kinds of stuff. So that phase of perimenopause is the stressor, and that can last for a couple of years to a whole decade or so. So that would be enough. Then once we're into menopause, there's other stressors with digestive systems that have changed. Your digestive enzymes have changed. Your hormone, patterns have changed. So I want to make a quick comment on the hair product. A big mistake people are making is trying to fix it from the outside in.
Yeah. Okay.
So 2 things real quickly. I want to say that if you can't eat it, it shouldn't go on your head.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's such a shame. Chemical shampoos just make your hair so much shinier.
Okay. So I had to ask my wife about this one as well. So my suggestion would be that we can nurture our scalp, and because remember, the skin's the largest organ in the human body, and it is porous. It takes things in, kick things out. Yeah. So like if you were to have like a coconut massage, like if you did like coconut oil or even sesame oil, which is a little thinner, you'd be able to get in there. That good. Now I asked her, I said, what would the And no, I'm not a good example. I just rub it in my head and rub it out like it's no big deal. And I asked her, what would be the draw? Why would you not do that as a woman with, like a full head of hair? Why wouldn't you put coconut oil? And she said, I'll be really greasy. It'd be like a lot of it here and not of it down here. And it'd be hard to manage. So I get it, but that would be very comforting and nurturing to your scalp. But chemicals, remember, chemicals anywhere in the body, they're anti-nutrient for the most part, right? So they're going to inhibit your ability to absorb nutrients into that area. So I haven't really talked about the nutrients that we're talking about. The nutrients we're talking about, all your trace minerals. Zinc is so important. And when you have a fever, one of the things that we're going to use a lot of is zinc. So we burn that out of the body. And, I do these zinc tests in my office. Karen, it takes 2 seconds. You swish around a little zinc solution and then, just kind of swallow it.
Yeah.
And like literally, I'd say 85% of people fail. So we're already deficient in zinc. And then you get a fever. And then that's when these shock moments happen to the body. And we kind of forget about them because the sloughing off, the shedding phase that we're kind of expediting here, the telogen phase, doesn't happen for 2 to 3 months. And then that's what they call the telogen effluvium. So going back to that, if you can't eat it, if you couldn't bring it into your body, into your digestive system, because you're putting it, once you put it on your skin, it's going into your bloodstream. That's going directly to your liver.
Forget that. But one of the big examples that always, like, I don't know, I feel like reminds people is like people put when you're in hospital, they put, drugs in patches for you, because it's faster to get into your body. Literally they're putting a patch of medication on your skin. Like it goes straight in, I don't know. I mean, it just because people don't think that any of their moisturizers or shampoos or conditioners are being absorbed, but they're like, yeah, of course my medication is going in my skin.
Yeah. So and that's a great point. So I think it's forgotten about often. And I think some of you, and I apologize tonight where I don't have a list of supplement or like a list of products that you could use. But that'll be that's some homework everyone can do, that you want to make sure that
you can look for organic ones,
and be picky, because if you're losing your hair and you're putting chemicals on it, you're probably expediting the shedding phase.
Yeah.
So, to kind of back up just a little bit here, when we are talking about the different types of, hair loss that we can have, cortisol, the stress hormone. So when we're under stress, also is a nutrient depleter. So that'll block nutrients that are trying to get into the body, that we're trying to utilize. So again, stress is this massive kind of untangible thing that so many of us haven't had on certain high levels. I would say now, looking back on it, a lot of the COVID cases, even though there was fever, and fever, of course, takes a lot of zinc in the body, takes a lot of vitamin C, from the body, that the stress that came with that was probably as detrimental as the actual virus was, because we've all had viruses before. And I think the stress that came with that really sent a lot of people kind of over the edge. And especially, last week we talked a little bit about if you're in that perimenopause phase, your ability to defend your body and defend against stress at this point in your life, you're just less capable than you once were. Not that you can't do it. You just have to really dial everything in. You have to have your adaptogen herbs. You have to have your sleep. You have to really be, a lot of mindfulness. All of this has to take place. The other thing that you'll experience when fever is part of this, that not only will you lose hair, but your hair will get dry.
Okay.
Yeah. So when fever literally sucks energy out of the body. So yin, so in Chinese medicine, there's yin and yang, and yin is like juicy and plump and moist. And that's like the fluids of the body. When your yin is deficient and your yang, or fire, stress, go, you have a lot of dryness in your body. And you have dry skin, you have dry hair, it becomes more brittle, it breaks easier. So then you want to do whatever helps to restore anything yin in the body. So what are those types of things? Yoga activities, breathing, meditation, oils, more oils, more oils. You can eat oil, essential oils, put them on your scalp. Those are bringing essentially the juice, the kind of the plumpness back into the body. So those are all healthy mechanisms, especially if you've experienced fever, then you experience some stress, or, you know, either one of those, the pause, and then the hair loss.
Yeah. Okay. So what, I mean, you kind of mentioned we've got some go-to, obviously we've got to take vitamin C. We've got a question here, you know, what else do we want to take, I guess is what I'm saying, for, you know, if we're experiencing this. And I've got a question here about reishi mushrooms. How do you feel about reishi mushrooms for stress?
So I love it. In fact, I'll take that one step farther, and that's a great topic and a great question. So mushrooms, reishi mushrooms, shiitake, Gordana, they all unique in the fact that they're all adaptogens. And what's really, really interesting about mushrooms, and this is definitely for someone who's had a immune/stress issue, using Gordana and shiitake or reishi would be very, very effective. And here's why: because mushrooms are also immune modulators. And what that means is that, so when we're like, say we're exposed to something like COVID, and we have this big, huge immune response, and boom, you end up having a cytokine response, which is fine. It's a cytokine storm that puts us in trouble. Too much inflammation going on, and you don't shut off your inflammatory response. That type of fever is where really the hair loss comes from. The mushrooms modulate, meaning they regulate your immune system. So if it's going on too long, it'll help stop it. Where then the adaptogens, so adaptogens essentially help us adapt to life. They make things easier. You guys hear George back there?
Yes.
Adaptogens make life easier. So that's where mushrooms really, so mushrooms can be very, very effective. In fact, there are some really good recipes out there for mushroom broths. So again, to help restore yin, broth, bone broth, collagen, you name it, drink broths. Mushroom broths, phenomenal. I was really smart. I'd have like a link that I would share with everyone for like a mushroom broth, but I don't. But I bet you can find them on Google.
Yeah, sure. But you can take these as supplements too, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we use supplements in our office. There's we use a mushroom supplement. So let's talk a little bit about. I'll go to the supplements in a minute. Let's talk about the different labs that you might run.
Yeah.
If you wanted to run labs, I don't know, Karen, that you need to run labs unless you're doing all these things and you just can't figure it out, and you have to determine whether this is an anemia or a thyroid issue. And therefore you would run a thyroid panel, and that would be, make sure you run all the markers. So there's about 9 markers that you want to run. And specifically in this situation is you got to have something called reverse T3.
Yeah. Okay. I've also, had somebody who this was a big issue from and lost her hair. Actually, I forgot about that, but reverse T3, that was the issue. And because it wasn't coming up on normal lab tests, it was really difficult to determine.
Yeah. So interesting enough, Karen, that I'm glad you shared that, because your lab panel, you run it and you might say, oh, my TSH looks good. My T4 looks good. Everything will look normal except for reverse T3. And when we see that as clinicians, immediately we go, well, we got an issue here. We have a stress issue and most likely a trace mineral deficiency.
Okay.
And the trace minerals, things like copper and iron and selenium and zinc, those are all critical for, I said selenium, are critical for thyroid function. So that just means right here, right now, you have a deficiency in your trace minerals. That's enough to make your hair fall out, because you need those foundationally. That's part of all the trace minerals that you need. And that's one of the supplements I'm going to recommend tonight. And if you don't run that reverse T3, you're probably going to blow right by that and say thyroid function good. But that's just writing on the wall, because once that happens, somewhere down the line, you're going to end up creating, dysfunction with the thyroid as well.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So run a thyroid panel, potentially an iron level panel. Is there anything else you want to run, or really they're the 2 first things you'd investigate if some of these protocols aren't working for you?
I would probably, if you had the access to it, I'd probably make sure I check like your folate and B12.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But if you ran those, you would at least, well, if any of them showed up low, that would be simple math and be like, all right, I definitely know that I have to address this moving forward.
Okay. And if people want to do these types of lab tests with you, how do they do that?
Easy breezy. They could call the office and literally we could send them a requisite, via email, and they can go to, local lab corp, no matter where they are in other states, whatever it may be. And then once they get the results they want, we would sit back down just like this on a Zoom and cover them. And in those scenarios too, if that is going on, again, remember, hair is indicative of many things. It tells us the body, if you're losing your hair, there are other, how do I say
Something's
this?
going on. Just something.
Something's going on.
Something's going on. Yeah, your body's trying to tell you, I'm not happy.
Yes. I was going to say you're unhealthy, but I don't want to say it that way. There are other things going on, and therefore your
body's trying to tell you about, right?
Yeah, and it's downstream. It's literally downstream. It is one of the last things taking place. It could be, certainly gut health is right at the top of this list. We saw a lot of dysfunction through COVID with guts. We didn't expect to see, but there's a lot of dysfunction that's taking place there. So what reason I'm mentioning that is, if someone wants to do those labs, they may want to just do a full male or a full female panel. It will cost a couple extra bucks, but when we do that, we then also get to look at, everything else, like the insulin resistant markers, resistance. We get to see the full cholesterol panels, which I say that because, again, sometimes we can see these really clear cholesterol panels and then one or two markers being high, and it correlates to the thyroid.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that we can start to piece together. But not necessarily you can just run a thyroid panel or just run an iron panel as well. So those are really what I would do for labs. Let's talk diet. We'll do subs last. Are we almost out of time? Oh, bummer, we are. All right. So real quickly, when it comes to food.
Because also all these things, I think one of the main points though also here is there's stuff that you can do about it, right? Like people regrow their hair. You can have people with really bad hair loss. It's falling out. People can reverse this.
Yes. I would say in this, so far in all the cases, I've seen every one of them come back over time. Yeah. Now, the question is just how long? Yeah. So that's the good news tonight. So if you're panicked, don't do anything extreme. That's really what I want to say. Don't do anything extreme. Don't start taking some weird, crazy drugs, because you might inhibit it and then create a real problem afterwards. So the supplements would go like this. One, absolutely, you need a trace mineral. That's different than a broad-based mineral, broad-based vitamin. So a trace mineral, I would absolutely do a full complex vitamin B. I use something called Cataplex B. There's a gluten-free version. I didn't mention really about the foods to eat here, but I'm going to simplify it. Eat grass-fed burgers, eat some liver, get some liverwurst. Okay, that's the best source of B vitamins and a lot of your other vitamins as well. We want biotin. And best source of biotin, eggs, beef liver, beef. So you want to get it from, essentially your animal products. Yes, green leafy veggies have a bunch of B vitamins, but certainly not the resources that animal proteins do. So trace minerals, we have ones called trace minerals, with a little bit of B12 in it, which is kind of perfect for thyroid function and for hair. Cataplex B as in boy. Yeah. And then we're going to want to use a little bit of biotin.
As a supplement?
You could, yeah. If you want extra, that's B7. It's in the Cataplex B, but that's kind of the notorious. I don't always use that one. It's kind of the notorious, like we need that one. Truthfully, you need the whole complex is what you really need to make it all work good. Always stay up on your omegas. Remember, we want to be juicy, right? So we want to restore the yin back into the body. So that could be omega-3s. That could be a fish oil, cod liver oil, fantastic. Even some of the plant-based oils like evening primrose oil or flaxseed oil, those are very effective as well. My favorite probably is going to be the cod liver oil. And then adaptogen herbs, no doubt about it. Even if you don't think you have stress in your life, if you've lost your hair, if you're losing your hair, your body's been under stress. My very first one I would probably recommend is something called ashwagandha forte. And I would stay on it for quite some time, at least 4 months. Because the hair growing process is probably going to be anywhere from 3 to 6 months, maybe a little bit longer for some people if the nutrients have been deficient. The challenge is most people after these stressful situations, their diets don't get better, they get worse. So that it kind of, heightens the deficiencies and all the other issues that we're having, nutritional imbalances. And then one other, but this is an important one, but we haven't talked about it all tonight, is supporting the adrenals. Yeah. So supporting, because you've been under that stress, and there's a product, Karen, I don't even know if we've talked, I'm sure we've brought it up on this show. There's something I use called Drenamin.
Okay, yeah.
Drenamin is really a vitamin C product that supports your adrenals. So it has all the materials and nutrients that is to support the actual gland. And then 50% of it is a vitamin C product. So perfect in this situation. So trace minerals B12, Cataplex B, biotin if you choose. It is a little overkill, but if you're losing your hair, you probably want overkill. Stay juicy, get your oils in, right? And then supporting the adrenal glands with that nutrient called Drenamin, and then the herb called ashwagandha. The comment earlier about the mushrooms, absolutely love it. So that's another good one that you could use there. You definitely need sleep. Can't discount the power of sleep. You have to put healthy stuff on your head. You can use some coconut oil. You got to get well. If you have a hormone imbalance, if you have other deficiencies taking place, if you got a bad diet, you've got to clean all that stuff up. Yeah. Because we're talking downstream here, when your hair is like the last thing to get everything. For some, it may take as much as 5 to 9 months. And for some, they start to see the regrowth within like 2 to 3 months. And what I find, as long as they see the regrowth, the stress starts going away.
We know that we're in the right direction then, at least.
Yeah.
The hair's starting to, we're at least healing it. It takes some time to have it grow, right? Like
it does. It takes time, no doubt about it. If you've had a baby, it is, I can almost use the word normal, that you're going to become a little bit nutritional deficient because you're feeding your baby now massively. And so you're depleting your resources. So in postpartum, to lose some hair is very common. So don't panic in that situation either. Don't start taking meds and stuff like that, because especially if you're, feeding your baby. Collagen, that's the other one I forgot to say. So get a good source of multi-collagen, specifically types 1 and 3 would be the type that your hair needs. And that's an easy one. You can put that in your coffee, put in your smoothie. You can put a lot of it in coffee, and then it tastes really good.
Yeah, awesome.
So that's it. So I guess the takeaway from tonight's hair loss is that some form of stress causes it. If you treat your body really good, you create really good health habits, it will grow back. It's a little uncomfortable and it's a little nerve-wracking because it's a big part of our identities, our hair, which is crazy, but it really is.
Yeah. It really is. Yeah. I mean, especially, women who might have long hair, or, it would be to have my hair start to fall out. Would be interesting. That's for sure. And I think that what you're saying in terms of it growing back feeds into kind of our clinical insight, just that the body does like heal, rejuvenate. Like if we can give it what it needs and figure out what's happening, we can, reverse or get over. Almost anything. I was reading this really crazy article about, again, one of those situations where this guy got hit by a hit and run on his bike and was just punctured lung, paralyzed down one leg, all these things. And he's gone on to like climb these mountains now and race on his bike. And amazing way of healing, like just an amazing capacity to heal, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And get used to that mantra and say it all the time. The power that made the body heals the body. And if we get out of the way and provide the way, then a lot can really happen. And that's exactly it when it comes to hair loss. If you lost some hair, I get it. And that by itself is stressful. But as we just discussed tonight, there's a lot of ways that you can really speed up the healing process. And the body is amazing. So my experience right now, especially over these last 2 years, that people have lost it for the reasons we talked about tonight, that I want to say, I think for the most part, everyone's getting it back. The only ones that haven't changed anything. And now they'll have the tools and the understanding to do so.
Yeah. Awesome. Love it. Okay. So what's going to be our one action that listeners take tonight to move them towards their goal of becoming superhuman?
I'm going to bring it back to the clinical insight that I shared within the mindset of choosing to be healthy versus not sick. So choose the one to be, healthy. and embrace the work, embrace the effort. The rewards are there. And like many things, yeah, it might be a little harder. I don't know that it's hard, but it might just be different than what you're currently doing. Well, most likely the people listening to this, you have a health journey. Be willing to continue to stack, to continue to get healthier and healthier. That's my takeaway for tonight.
Yeah, love it. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll be back same time, same place next week for another episode of the Health Made Simple show.
Awesome. And of course, you guys keep doing. I appreciate all of you. Keep sharing out, keep spreading love. And of course, continue to take deliberate action for your mind, your body, your overall wellness. That'll be awesome.